The main focus in spiritual and religious text is the need for the individual to change.
We can use the fundamental teachings that Jesus gave to awaken.
Gnosis really defines the techniques that can be used to discover ourselves, to learn about ourselves, acquire self-knowledge.
There's a set procedure, a formula to do this, and that's outlined really in the Gnostic texts.
The scriptures come to life as we walk the path that is spoken about in them.
The path, the way to enlightenment, liberation, or salvation. The fundamental aim in Gnosticism is to find and walk the spiritual path, which has been alluded to in spiritual traditions and religions. Jesus referred to this path when he said, "Straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it." In the ancient Christian Gnostic teachings, self-knowledge is often referred to as vital for spiritual progress. Those who could know themselves could understand the scriptures and find the keys to walk the path and unlock their true potential. The Christian Gnostic texts all point the way to this. They are a rich resource of spiritual information. The main ancient Christian Gnostic texts studied by Gnostics today are from the Nag Hammadi Library, the Pistis Sophia, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas, the Book of Revelation, and the 4 Gospels of the New Testament. These texts contain a wealth of teachings about inner development and the way to salvation. The Nag Hammadi Library. Banned and buried in ancient times, this collection of papyrus books contains texts with direct teachings of Jesus and his disciples. It was discovered in a jar in the Egyptian desert in 1945, bringing to light the largest source of early Christian Gnostic teachings available, and powerful teachings of Jesus that would otherwise have been lost to the history and the desert sands. Many texts from different sources were found buried together in this collection, but the most useful for these studies are those from the Christian Gnostics mentioned here, which contain teachings from Jesus and his disciples. These texts unveil a hidden side to Jesus' teachings, including secret dialogues he gave to his disciples in private.
Once this Nag Hammadi collection was discovered, scholars started to recognize that some of the texts in there were the very texts being referred to by the original persecutors of the Christian Gnostics.
The rediscovery of them has brought a whole other side to Jesus' teachings and the life of his apostles to light.
We have in these books direct quotes from Jesus and direct teachings from Jesus to the disciples.
And we're able to decipher the meaning of those and use them then for our own spiritual progress.
The Gospel of Thomas is perhaps the most famous and widely quoted of the Gnostic texts.
It's just basically a collection of sayings of Jesus.
Many sayings appear in the New Testament Gospels. So in that way, it shows the link between the biblical Gospels and the Gnostic Gospels, but it also contains many sayings that were not in the Gospels of the Bible.
One of the interesting themes found in the Gospel of Thomas is the need for the person to look within, to really know themselves.
One of the most famous sayings is, "The kingdom is inside of you and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty." The Gospel of Philip is this extremely poetic gospel. It contains very mysterious teachings. It talks of marriage, and it talks of the bridal chamber, which in Gnosticism is something very, very important.
The Pistis Sophia was another important Gnostic text and was the largest source of Gnostic teachings before the Nag Hammadi Library was discovered. Banned in the 4th century, it was acquired by the British Museum in 1795 and translated in the 1850s. It begins, "It came to pass when Jesus had risen from the dead, that he passed 11 years discoursing with his disciples."
The pistis Sophia roughly translates from the ancient Greek to mean power, wisdom, and it's often been considered as the Gnostic Bible. It's a very advanced text.
One thing that's very interesting about this text is that women who appear in the Bible, such as Mary Magdalene and Martha, are taught alongside the men, the disciples, and are equal to them.
It's a guide to use in order to understand how to approach the spiritual work and how to walk the spiritual path.
It shows that Jesus existed beyond the crucifixion and continued to teach the disciples.
Denounced by the anti-Gnostic bishop Irenaeus in his infamous diatribe against heresies in 180 AD, the Gospel of Judas is again a source of controversy today. Rediscovered in the 1970s in Egypt, it was eventually translated and published in 2006, bringing to light a behind-the-scenes account of Judas's role in the betrayal. In this Gospel, Jesus asks Judas to betray him.
In the writings of Irenaeus, persecuting the Gnostics, he makes reference to the fact that they actually had a Gospel of Judas, and it was quite scoffed at.
It's clearly shown that Judas was considered perhaps, the most advanced apostle, and Jesus purposefully initiated his own crucifixion.
Here we have a very different account of the betrayal. Jesus is asking Judas to do this for him.
So then that leaves one to wonder why Jesus would have done such a thing.
The life of Jesus and all the central characters involved in that life actually represent internal parts of each individual person. And Judas plays an important role in the whole drama that takes place.
Judas represents desire. So Judas the disciple himself wasn't bad, but he played the role of the villain. He played the role of that desire that makes us give up spirituality for the sake of material things.
Jesus was enacting out like a cosmic drama, a sequence of events, key events that every initiate goes through in the path of transformation or the path to liberation.
The role Judas played as the betrayer serves as a warning of the pitfalls of desire on the path and how it leads to failure.
The Gospel of Mary is another important Gnostic text and is the only known Gospel attributed to a woman. It was acquired as part of the Berlin Codex by a German scholar in Cairo in 1896. It remained in relative obscurity until the much more publicized Nag Hammadi library was discovered. In this Gospel, Mary is taught alongside Jesus' disciples, as in the Pistis Sophia.
Another gospel that was known about before the Nag Hammadi but wasn't made very public was the Gospel of Mary. And in this we have Mary Magdalene, who's equal to the apostles in receiving teachings from Jesus.
It's quite important for Christian Gnostics trying to understand the relationship between the soul, matter, spirit and desire. And it basically contains a description from Jesus, a story about the things that are encountered along the spiritual path.
The biblical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are shared by Christians and Gnostics alike. To Gnostics, the texts are more than just a collection of Jesus' teachings. The events of his life map the very path to walk to salvation. This is why Jesus said, "I am the way."
The 4 Gospels found in the New Testament are Gnostic Gospels. They contain secret teachings and hidden teachings. And much of that is contained in the very events of Jesus' life.
However, the Gnostics, even though accept that as maybe historical events that actually took place, see a deeper symbolic meaning in the life of Jesus.
His life demonstrates the path, and the key events show the key stages on the path. Those with that deeper understanding throughout history have been able to look to the four Gospels and from that acquire Gnosis and find the spiritual path.
People could understand it on deeper levels, and it was the Christian Gnostics who understood those deeper levels better than anyone because they had that direct experience.
As we know, Jesus had a public teaching and a private teaching, a secret teaching that he only gave to close apostles.
So that's showing the private side to the teachings that he gave to the disciples versus the public side that the masses took.
The public teaching was beneficial because it gave people a way of finding something, finding like a stepping stone to the path.
Jesus taught according to the levels of the understanding of the people he was teaching. So often the parables and the stories he was telling could be interpreted by people on many different levels. So even though they were useful for all different people, for all people really, the Christian Gnostics could understand the deeper significance of what it was Jesus was actually saying.
The Book of Revelation is a Gnostic text of symbolism and prediction, which eventually made its way into the Bible. Its use was contested in the first 4 centuries of Christianity and again in the Reformation of the 1600s. It was probably kept due to the warning at the end, "And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take his part out of the book of life."
The book of Revelation is the only other really Gnostic text that made it into the New Testament besides the 4 Gospels.
It's a book of prophecy, and it was almost not included in the formation of the New Testament.
The book of Revelation contains a lot of symbolism and a lot of predictions.
When John talks about having visions and visiting angels and seeing all the different things that are being shown to him, modern Gnostics can understand how it is that John has these kinds of visions.
The teachings also relate to the overall picture of, mankind and the position that we have in the purpose of being here.
These ancient Christian Gnostic texts can be obscure to us today and difficult to grasp, but practicing Gnosis allows us to understand them in a way that is beyond the intellect, beyond our ideas. The teachings cannot be fully grasped intellectually. Personal experience is needed to understand the hidden meanings.
There's more to be taken from all of this than just understanding the texts.
Intellectually, it means very, very little. The whole purpose of those texts is to learn how to experience, how to go through certain esoteric experiences.
It's through this personal experience that we gain knowledge of hidden things, that we understand the deeper meanings that are in the text, and that we're able to find and walk along the spiritual path.
What that takes is direct experience, and that requires a strong effort on the part of the individual.
An essential part of Gnosticism is change. One can talk about knowledge and say all these spiritual sounding things, and even read all the texts and become an expert on them. But if a person doesn't change, they're very far away from the experience of Gnosis.
Gnosis teaches that the root of the world's problems is the psychology of people. The way we are, the way we live, act, and treat one another depends on what is within us. Actions arise as a consequence of our inner states, so by knowing ourselves and understanding how we work from within, we can change for the better.
Within the world there's a great deal of negativity, there's a great deal of problems.
We live in a world full of war and crime, environmental devastation, cruelty, hatred.
The world is made up of individuals. So to understand why the world is the way it is and how to change that, we first need to understand how it is that we work inside, internally, psychologically.
If we don't change inside, we'll continue to be driven to act in the same old way.
So as we can change internally, then the actions of humanity generally will change.
By seeing and understanding what is within us and how it operates, we can change it, transforming the nature of ourselves so that we can unite with the divine.
Practicing Gnosis can reveal the great mysteries of life and death to us, such as why are we here? We are born and die without knowing why, and face death not knowing what lies ahead. Gnosis gives us the eyes to see and the ears to hear that Jesus spoke of.
Gnostics today do the same things, practice the same exercises as Gnostics from the past. They're the same exercises used to achieve mystical states, the same exercises to learn about oneself and gain self-knowledge.
Without that knowledge, we never are able to answer the essential questions, like what happens after death. Gnosis is really a way to achieve this kind of understanding of the broader mysteries of life.
So we can understand and do what we have to do in order to develop wisdom and peace.
Christian Gnosticism teaches the way to reach enlightenment by going through a defined process of change. This process is the spiritual path. The path is not something imagined or invented by any person or culture. It is a set of spiritual principles that exist as part of the process of spiritual growth. There are specific things that we need to do in order to walk this path.
We have to remove all these harmful inner states like anger, greed, and hate,
and replace them with increased consciousness. Consciousness itself is that divine spark within everybody that, when active, enables us to feel higher spiritual feelings and faculties.
We also need to transform the nature of our energies, the structure of our own psychology, and this is an energetic process. The other thing we have to do is help others spiritually. We have to take up the opportunity to help others, and by doing this Gnostic work and changing ourselves, we're in a better position to help and benefit others.
The spiritual path is what is necessary to gain that profound change that is spoken of by the disciples, by the Gnostic Gospels, and by Jesus himself.
That concludes the second segment of this series. Join me next time for part 3. See you then.